Hello and welcome to the Long Ways Podcast. I'm Devin Windelspecht.
And I'm Michael Windelspecht.
And on this podcast, we're trying to take you to the long trails of Europe. We're a father-son hiking duo, and we want to do this podcast as a way to talk about all of the adventures, misadventures, and highs and lows of the trails that we've traveled on. So I want to start with who we are, Dad. Tell me more about yourself.
Hey, okay. So one thing I am not a professional hiker. I am actually a biologist and an author. And I started doing these, and you'll hear a lot more about this, but I started doing these really to kind of get outside and do some stuff with my son. I have hiked a lot in my life, okay, but never these long trails, not the 80, 90, 100, 110 mile trails we're going to talk of. So I'm looking forward to doing this because I want to share with you some of the stuff I've learned about myself and about how you actually do these trips. So,
exactly. So I'm obviously Michael's son. I have been hiking since I was a kid. We grew up in the mountains of North Carolina together. But like Dad, I'm not a professional hiker. I am someone who loves traveling. I love culture. I love languages. But I'm also someone who loves nature from growing up and all of that. But what we want to do here today is not so much talk about us. What we want to talk about is that first day on the trail.
First day.
So when we started off hiking the Tour of Mont Blanc. Let me tell you a little bit about the Tour of Mont Blanc. It's about 100-mile trail that goes through France, Switzerland, and Italy, around the highest mountain in Europe, depending on your definition, Mont Blanc. It is a trail that is tough. It's also known as one of the greatest hiking trails in Europe. And we first started this when I was coming off of a study abroad in France at the very end of my undergraduate. I was sitting in Paris, and I think I just texted my dad, hey, in 2 weeks, do you want to come over and hike this trail with me?
Sure, why not?
Exactly.
What could go wrong?
I remember, actually, the first time seeing you. You had flown in to Paris, Charles de Gaulle Airport, and you were sitting there forlorn in Charles de Gaulle while they were doing a train strike, if you remember correctly.
Yes,
and then having to use my very, very poor French to get us from Paris all the way to the start of our trail.
Right.
A little town named Les Ouches in the very, very, very edge of France.
Right, yeah. That was a brutal day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember calling you and trying to get you. You hadn't woken up yet. We were early.
Yep.
And I had to actually hand a 3x5 card to the cab driver to get him to bring me to the train station.
Exactly.
And I couldn't order coffee. And I've traveled all over Europe. I mean, I've lived in Europe, but not in France.
Yep.
And that was probably also one of the most interesting train rides. We rode everything from a high-speed bullet train, right, which is going, crazy speeds, leaning, to what was basically a country train of two cars at the very end. So it was quite a trip,
Yeah, getting off that train and coming up to what looked to be an abandoned train station almost in Les Ouches, and just getting someone saying pretty much your stop. And we looking at ourselves carrying these massive suitcases, trying to figure out what the hell we were doing. We were using suitcases back then too. I want to remember that.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing, and it's funny you say that because I didn't know how to prepare for these. But at the time, I basically went to REI and went, okay, I'm going hiking, and I think I planned for a big day hike.
Yeah,
okay.
That was pretty much the idea. It looked like
I had all this stuff, and I mean more clothes. I knew what to do with, and. So we cart these things out into what looked like an abandoned train station.
Yep.
There was nobody there. There was no people.
Turns out that this town, Les Ouches, is a lot more popular in the winter when this is a small ski town. But when we were there, you didn't see anyone at all. But one of the things we want to do on this podcast is bring you to a day in the trail. It's not going to be a sequential thing where it could be one day in Ireland, one day in Mont Blanc, one day in Portugal, which we're coming up to do soon. But we want to take one day and we want to bring that out to you to show you what it's like to hike these long trails, but also what we learned from these. What were these adventures that we went on? And we wanted to start on this first episode with the first day of hiking Mont Blanc. Right. Our first day of hiking that trail. Dad, you want to give a little bit of kind of an overview of, what the structure of our hike was?
Sure. The general rule of what we did is we used a travel company called Max Adventures, okay? And what they do for you is they actually move your luggage between these different hostels, hotels, okay, bed and breakfasts, okay, depending on where you're at. And this makes it nice because basically what you're doing are long day hikes. And you get up in the morning, you have some breakfast, okay, at the place. You usually have to pack a lunch, okay, depending on where we're at. And then you basically hike, okay, to your next destination. Your luggage is there, you have a dinner there, and you keep repeating this, okay, over a course of about a week. 7 to 8 days is usually a normal hiking time for it.
Yeah, depending on the trail, we've done as long as 10 and as short as about 6.
Yeah.
But usually it is around a week, the ones we do. Hiking in Europe is very different than in the States. In the States, and I've done this before, actually, right after high school, it's a lot more about having everything on your back and really getting up there in the mountains and going 5-6 days without seeing another human being. These trails in Europe, Mont Blanc is a really, really good example. They're still tough. You're still doing those ascents and those descents. But they're a lot more about getting up in the mountains between towns. I mean, as a reminder, most of these places in Europe, there's not as much space. There's towns you're traveling through while you're hiking all the time in a way that you wouldn't get hiking maybe like the Rockies or the Appalachian Trail in America. But this first day, let me paint an image of what the structure of that first day was. So you start in Les Houches. And immediately the guidebook pretty much says there's an easy way and there's a hard way.
Yeah. And guess which one? We were exhausted.
Jet lagged, especially Dad. I wasn't so much at that point. And one of the ways to get to the easy one was to bypass, and already at the very start we're bypassing part of the trail, is this gondola that takes you up to the ridgeline. This was also an experience which is me shoved to the front of this line going, do you speak English? And it's absolutely not. Nope. And having to fumble my horrible French to just try to get a small ticket onto the gondola up. So our hike actually didn't begin at the start of the trail. Our hike began about 3 miles into the trail.
We began our hike with a gondola ride.
We began our hike with an easy gondola ride.
Exactly.
But, just to kind of paint what this trail looks like, what this day looks like, the first day, so you could take the higher ridge hike, or you could take this more meandering one that goes along the ridge for a while. It kind of passes this really nice ski hotel right at the col. And col is the word used in most of Europe for what we call usually a saddle in America. And so what a col is that it's where you have the edge of two mountains and they kind of form what looks like a saddle. Right in between them, and that's where the trail usually goes. It goes into these passes right between the mountains. So our first one was I think it was Bionassi. Our first col. And that was sitting there right up by this beautiful ski lodge, kind of overlooking Les Houches. As you keep going throughout the day, you pass several small little towns. You pass these little ones that look like they were built in medieval times. Have these ancient churches right there. And it's the kind of place where there's a dirt road kind of coming off the main highway down in the bottom, but you really feel as you're hiking through this kind of along the ridgelines, then having these massive glaciers behind you from the Mont Blanc Glacier. You're kind of hiking through these pine forests all along the bridge. So our first day was about 10 miles, I would say. And it started with that coming up onto the ridgeline, and then this kind of a slow, meandering descent down into town. Now that sounds easy. For us, it was tough. And I think this is something that we have to realize. The first day on the trail, even though we've gotten better at this time and time again, for all the training you do and that kind of stuff, the first day can be the toughest, if you want to talk more about that, Dad.
Yeah, I think it really is for a lot of reasons. I think that one of the things that is really tough about this, and I think the thing I'm saying tough, okay, it's there's a physical toughness and there's a mental toughness to it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the physical toughness is obviously if you've trained, and you're doing these long hikes to prepare, you can do it. I mean, there's nothing that hard about.
Some of the ascents
are pretty tough. Okay, but I mean they're doable.
Yeah.
Okay, obviously these trails are all possible. You don't have to be an expert climber or anything like that. You don't have to have special gear.
Yeah.
You have to have good shoes. Obviously,
Yeah.
We found out later. But I think so. The physical part of it, you are carrying everything on your back. You are carrying a lot of water, and we'll talk about the water, I'm sure, in a little bit again, because that's kind of a cool story. But there's really the first day, the tough part is the mental part. I mean, in most cases, if we're hiking these long trails of Europe, and we've gotten better at this, you're coming in, you're tired. Mm-hmm. We've now built down days to begin and end trips because of this. But so you have this mental, but the mental part of it is really getting out of your own head for a few moments, okay? Mm-hmm. Because you're starting off and you have all this anxiety and you want to get going, you're not sure what there's going to be. And by day 2 or 3, the mental stuff starts to fade and you kind of get into a rhythm, if we're going to go hiking. And it is a destination hiking, so you know how far you need to go. 10 or 15 miles is normal, sometimes shorter or longer. The physical part of it is, Devin said, it does have some, there you are going up and down, and up and down. And then if you're going to hike the coals, you're going to hike to a ridge and you're going to hike down, okay? Up, down, and that's going to be basically how this one's going to work. Very different in Scotland, very different in Ireland, okay?
But if you've never been to the Alps in Europe, it's interesting. So where we're from in North Carolina, we actually live in an elevation that's just about the same, maybe a little bit lower than what the Alps, this section of the Alps actually are, 4,000 to 5,000 feet.
Yeah.
So you're not talking something like altitude sickness, like 15,000 feet or whatever, unless you're actually hiking Mont Blanc itself.
Right.
But the thing with these mountains is that they have that kind of structure of the Rockies, that kind of jagged structure, that it isn't like these graceful mountains like you get where we're from, or if you're maybe from New England, or you've been to the Berkshires, or the Catskills. This is something where you look up. And I think this was our first day. This kind of, what the hell were we thinking?
Yes.
Waking up in the morning, having the sun come right over the mountains is just absolutely gorgeous. Because you're usually starting these days at 6 or 7 in the morning. And looking at ourselves and looking up and looking at the guidebook and being like, we have to climb that.
Yes. Every day.
Every day. Now, the first day we did cheat with the gondola. But as time goes on, it really is kind of that realization, here's this wall of mountains in front of you. Your next hotel, your next bed and breakfast is on the other side of those mountains.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think the important thing is that, I know for Mont Blanc especially, the motivation was, absolutely the most beautiful scenery I think I've seen. And I think it was also even more beautiful because you've got Mont Blanc, this beautiful glacier-covered mountain. Like Devin was saying, you don't actually hike on Mont Blanc. You're hiking around it. Okay, You're always looking at Mont Blanc or her sister mountains, depending on where, from a different angle each day, and that's kind of cool as well. You never really actually are on the mountain. You're kind of on the shoulders, obviously. And I think that the fun part about this is every day you've got this beautiful mountain and beautiful scenery, and when you get to the tops of each of the cols, it's just these views are to die for. Okay, and we'll post pictures up on our website about this, so you can see what some of these things are. But it truly, that helps the mental part of it. You've got to get into that part of it. You've got to get into not the 15 miles. You've got to get into let's stop and take a look. And so we're gonna talk about that at some point too.
Well, let's pull back to that question though, that thing of why the hell are we doing this?
Yeah.
That we first thought.
Yeah.
Dad, why are you doing this?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Okay, I think the number one reason is that like you said, our family has always been in hiking in mountains and outdoors. We've always done things, camping and hiking, not 100-mile trails, obviously, but we've done that type of stuff. And the chance to do it with you, okay, you had finished college. We really hadn't seen you a lot for a couple of years, okay, because you were away for school and everything, and it was a chance to do it with you, okay, and that was really important. And my part, I was looking for a challenge. I'm not a young man anymore. Okay.
Okay. You had 2 bad knees.
I had 2 bad knees. We've gradually replaced them.
Yeah, over a couple of trails.
Over a couple of trails. Yeah, we've got new knees, so that does help. But I think that for me, it was I needed some sort of challenge. I'm a writer and a scientist and a biologist, and I do a lot of traveling and everything. But I needed to have a physical and a mental challenge to break things up. And
so let's bring back to that first day. What do you think was the biggest mental or physical challenge on that first day for you?
The physical challenge was really, even though we said we took a gondola up, we didn't take the gondola all the way up. We just basically got to the top of a ridge line, which is, it really wasn't considered to be the best part of the trail anyways. It was just kind of like, you're going to be hiking up a ski resort. Okay, so it wasn't, we're not really missing anything. But then you go to the physical part of it was there were some decent ascents that first day. Okay,
Yeah.
you do get stuck sometimes. Not the first day here because this was more pine, but there's lots of switchbacking. You're going to go back and forth and back and forth, and sometimes it has a nice incline to it. And if you're not ready, this first trip, we really weren't that ready for it. With shoes and things. I mean, we had good shoes, but not what we needed. And so there was that physical part of it.
Yeah.
The mental part really was that anxiety of what if I don't get to the next stop, right? What if what's going to be around the corner? Okay, what if something happens? What if, all those things that run through your head, which make you distracted from the fact that I'm hiking with this beautiful mountain.
Yeah.
Okay, in some cases waterfalls.
Yeah.
Okay, always sceneries, little French towns.
Yep.
You hike past these little huts. At the top of the cols, you usually see the farmers up there.
Yeah. With the shepherds and
exactly.
everything. Yeah.
So I think that was it for me.
Yeah.
It was a combination and of sheer exhaustion from not having slept and getting up really early the next morning. When we started, it would have been 2 a.m. my time.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not used to starting a 15-mile hike at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay.
On my end, just talking about like the challenges of that first day, physical. Let's just say that coming out of college, I was in a little bit better shape back then than I might be now, even though I keep doing these trails. So the physical wasn't that much. I actually remember there's a moment, I think about maybe 2 hours into the trail, where Dad took off his massive backpack and we had to switch for my little one because he's like, there's no way we're going to do this like this. But also, so physical wasn't a big deal. There are some, there's some difficult parts. But I remember the first day for me, the challenge actually kind of came mentally towards the end. And that challenge, and it's something that I think happens in a lot of stuff, it was when we had come off the mountain. We had passed like this beautiful glacier stream coming down the mountain.
Yep.
And really pushed ourselves really hard.
Yep.
We didn't know how to pace ourselves yet, and eventually we figured that out.
We weren't stopping enough.
We weren't taking enough breaks.
Yep.
But for me, it was this, you kind of come through at the very end. There's not a lot of road walking on Mont Blanc. There'll be a little bit more some of the future trails we do, but you're kind of walking through like this really hot, almost like suburb, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of the town we were going to end up with, which was Les Cantons. If any French listeners are listening, my French pronunciation and language skills are atrocious. But what it really was in that was that kind of feeling like, I want to be done. I want to be there.
Right.
And kind of that can put you into a really bad headspace because it's that grumpy headspace. It's that thing of, I'm not having fun anymore. I'm tired. I'm chafing, which is a big problem sometimes, especially if it's like hot and sticky and that kind of stuff. And I remember like that kind of feeling at the very end of just, I want to get done. I want to go home. Even I want to go home. Like, this isn't fun. This was a bad idea.
Right.
And I think that's something that might, especially if you're a first time hiker, that's going to hit your head.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Why not just take a taxi back and like go to Paris and like sit around and drink beer?
Right.
Oh
yeah.
And trust me, sometimes you do like that cold beer at the end is something.
Oh yeah. I will always recommend that you have the cold beer at the end. Okay, of every day, because it's amazing how much you relax once you've actually done it.
But I think for me, breaking that mental thing, which is in two ways. The first is usually to stop and, like you were saying, look at where you are.
Yeah.
Even if, yes, that was kind of in a small subdivision, but that was even ringed by these beautiful mountains, and by you hear French kind of being called out from, which is a language I absolutely adore, even if I'm horrible at it. You hear French kind of called out from the windows and stuff like that. So having that moment to kind of sit and be appreciate where you are.
Yeah.
And the second one is to say, I'm doing something big. And it's big for me. I'm here to complete something. And it's not about completing something as in I have to get to the end of the trail. It's completing something as I'm here on a journey and I'm going to do this journey for me. And kind of keeping that in your mind. And I think that's something, the first day is always the hardest sometimes with those two.
Yeah, and we've had those challenges no matter what trail we've been on now. That first day is getting back into the idea that the mental headspace of, you can do this.
Yeah.
We have done this.
Yeah.
Okay, we know what we're going to be in for. And, kind of just trying to be in the moment more.
Yeah.
Okay, instead of worrying about, what's going to happen with the flight home or this or that, or, I think you're absolutely right on this, Devin. I think that that was part of the fun of this is that mental challenge, okay, of overcoming your own doubts as to whether you can do it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, okay, if you're wondering if you can do it, okay, I've done it, okay, and so if I've done this, you can do it too. I mean, we're not professional hikers.
So I have two things to end on.
Okay.
One is I kind of want to paint that picture. We were talking about the struggles at the end, like that mental health. Ending that day, which is one of the best ways to end a day. We were talking about that cold beer. We ended up in like a small bed and breakfast in Les Clémentines. It's a small to medium sized town.
Yeah.
One of the larger towns we went through along the way. Beautiful French bread and breakfast. Having people, coming in, just a classic French dinner, a bottle of French beer, and just sitting there and having that feeling at the very end of, I just did that.
Right.
It happens at the end of every day, no matter how tired you are or how wet you are, and we'll talk about that with some of the rainstorms, or how hot you are, or anything like that. That feeling at the end of the day is, I just completed that, and that sense of accomplishment just kind of drifts through you as you're sitting there like with that beautiful scenery around you.
Yep.
The other thing I want to ask you, Dad, is what are the tips you would give someone for their first day on the trail?
A couple big tips I would give you, especially if you're not used to these types of things, is we started off with this idea that we would hike 45 minutes and take a 15-minute break.
Yeah.
Okay. And that sounded great. I mean, but it almost became like a forced march.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
And we changed our mind on that, even during this trail.
Yeah.
Okay. And definitely on later trails, we stopped when we wanted to.
It was usually around once every hour, an hour and a half. Depending.
It still was. It still was that type of thing. The other thing is that when you're hiking, don't feel as if you have to hike together. Okay,
No.
The trails are usually very well marked.
Yeah.
So therefore, don't worry about if somebody's hiking faster than you. You want to stop and take a picture, you do that.
And that's usually how we hike. Usually, me or Eric, who's another hiking friend of ours who will join us in future hikes, we would usually hike a little bit ahead, and it would be spread out. And there's becomes like these natural points on the trail where you kind of realize like this is a nice place to take a break.
Yep.
And then everyone just kind of like comes together.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing would be and what I'm saying that is it's kind of take things at your own pace, because you can tire yourself out pretty fast if you decide you're going to try to keep at somebody else's pace. I'm 58, okay, and I'm not going to be able to hike at the same pace as Devin does, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just not, and it would just tired me out, and so you have to be honest with that. But the other thing is really, I keep coming back to this, is to enjoy the moment, okay? While you're walking, there's a natural tendency to kind of space out, okay, or start to look at the ground too much or something like that. You need to look at these trees, the villages, the town, the people. Yeah. There's a lot, you run across a lot of people in Mont Blanc. We'll introduce them. I'm sure be definitely a people discussion one day. That would be my advice. The other thing would be to make sure that you pack light.
Yeah.
Okay. I really have to say that the first day I packed a camera.
And I would also say, we use one company, but there's several other companies that do this, especially with Mont Blanc. The value, if you're financially able, of being able to not carry the entire day on your back, and to have someone ship the major stuff from place to place.
Right.
Now, it depends. If you're like a gonzo hiker, then go ahead. But for someone like Dad and I, or people who might be listening who haven't done things like this before, the difference between having a light day pack on your back and a massive backpacking pack on your back, as someone who's done both, is massive for just enjoying the trail.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I was not enjoying the trail. Every time now I pack lighter and lighter and lighter. Not just the stuff that's being moved, okay, but also on the trail. And
the recommendation I would have, though, the one thing not to skimp out on is water.
Water.
We usually carried around 2 to 3 liters at a time, minimum.
Right. And that was and also small food items. You're not going to eat a lot, but eat constantly. Keep your energy up. And we'll talk more about packing and things like that. We'll actually put a lot of this up on our website as well. In case you're interested, you're like, what did they pack for this, or things along those lines. So, yeah, I think that's a nice picture to leave them with.
Yeah, I would just leave with this also from the first day. Don't get intimidated.
No,
because especially if you're someone who's not used to hiking or this is your first time, it's easy to see all the people around you and think like, Because especially in something like Mont Blanc, there's a lot of hikers. And then you have like the Swiss or something who are just like, I don't know, they're just like mountain goats up there.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to be...
those runners, the people who ran Mont Blanc, and they run with, like, they're wearing like shorts, and they have this little itty bitty pack on their back, and they're running like 80 miles.
Yeah. There are going to be people like that. But for the most part, most people are in the same place as you.
Yeah.
It's not a race. It's a personal challenge.
Right.
And you have to remember on these things that the challenge comes as part of it. And not to be intimidated by the challenge. You're able to do this trail. This is not something technical. This is not something like hiking Everest or anything like that. This is a trail you can do. And I think, when we were sitting there going, what the hell are we doing at the foot of the mountains? The answer really is, we're going to go hike this trail. That's what we're doing.
Yep. We're going to hike today, and tomorrow we're going to do another hike.
Exactly.
And the next day we'll do another hike.
So, that's where we kind of want to end on here. Going forward with this podcast, we want to take you to a day on the trail. Whether it's on Mont Blanc, our next one will also be on Mont Blanc. Or in Ireland, or in Scotland, or as we keep doing these trails, more and more of these. Right. So keep tuned. Please send us comments, emails, going on our website. We'll include like more tips, some packing tips, some photos. For Mont Blanc, our photos are going to be okay, but especially when we get our photography friend Eric's photos from the other two. Those are really good. And other tips, tricks, but also like maybe even some more reflections, written reflections on the trail in these days. So thank you for listening. Once again, I'm Devin Windelspecht.
And I'm Michael Windelspecht.
And you've been listening to the Long Ways podcast, and we look forward to being able to speak with you again.